Dear students, welcome once again. It's Mr. Chunga with the presentation for your second language teaching to prepare you for the 2020 exams and throughout the year. Let's look at what we have today. First of all, I would love to emphasize the following. This presentation will guide you on key issues in this course. Study together with your study guide. Please do not only rely on these notes. Also acquaint yourself with question verbs in your study guide. In most cases, what I've seen is that students don't even know the keywords of the information that they write, because then you find a situation where students switch content, for questions. So please also, acquaint yourself with the keywords in your subject. I've given you my cell phone number. You can send me an email also. When you have queries, please call me during the weekdays between 16:30 to 20 hours. First of all, I would love us to look at the levels of language learning. When you learn a language, there are levels, 5 levels that you need to understand, or that you need to make use of. The first one is phonology. Phonology has to do with the sound system of the language. How do you pronounce letters? What are the sounds that constitute that particular language? So in other words, you can have different phonology of different languages. For example, I always give an example of the Silozi language, where you pronounce the letter B in some cases as it were a V. All right. Places like Vocalo are not Bukalo, but Vocalo. Morphology. Morphology is then the formation of words. How do you form words? This is where we talk about prefixes and suffixes, where we are engaged in a process of forming words. From the roots, we can add some more prefixes and suffixes to make different word classes from one word. For example, if we say the word colony, we can have words like colonization, decolonization, colonize. All these are words that we form from one root. Syntax. When we speak or when we write, we put words together to make sentences, build paragraphs on that, build essays, and so on. So there are rules. We don't just put the words without following specified rules. For example, subject-verb agreement. For example, subject, verb, object. So these are all rules that govern languages. We don't just mix words anyhow and expect to make sense. Then semantics. These are word meanings. The meanings that we make in our sentences, the meanings that we attach to words. So this is another different level also. Now, pragmatics is one interesting one. When we use language, there are always contexts. So a word may not necessarily mean the same thing in all situations. Or there are words that we may use to other people and we may not use it to another group of people. So the situation determines the meaning of words. We may also use code language among ourselves. There could be things that if I am talking to my friends, there are words that I use that only them would understand and others would not understand. So it would be unfair of me to come to your group and start using the language that I use or the register that I use with my friends, because you may not understand. There are social connotations to what give rise to the meaning of these words when used in my group. So these are the 5 levels of language. So when you teach your children, These are all levels that you need to carry through. They should know how to pronounce, or what the rules of pronunciation say. They should know how to build words from the other. They should also know how to form sentences. They should also know how to, the meanings of the words that they use. And eventually they should understand what kind of language they should use to adults, what kind of language they should use to their peers. What do they do? What kind of language do they use to show respect, to ask, ask for permission and so on. So it is very important that we have these levels. Then the next one is we have domains of childhood development. By domains we mean aspects. We mean areas in which a child should develop. All right? There are 4 areas, or there are 4 domains. One is physical development, that is your physical body, the physical body. You can actually look at a child and estimate the age that a child is in by looking at their physical appearance. But there is more to it, because whatever we perform is because of our physical abilities. Then we have the cognitive development domain, that is now your mind. Is the mind at the level where the child is supposed to be? And that preparedness, that development is also a prerequisite for certain things, or for certain things that they do at school. Then you have language development. How much is their language developed? Or what aspects of language are we talking about when we look at the child's development in terms of language? Then we have social development. That is now the domain where they interact, play with others, look at their own feelings, temperament, and so on. So let's look at each one of these. Physical development, we are talking about physical skills. We also call these skills as motor skills. Motor skills give children the ability to make purposeful movements. What do we mean by purposeful movements? That is, when with intention, when they have intent, for example, to write, are they able to move their hands in a way that will produce handwriting? Learn the physical characteristics of the self and the environment. What about, how do they move their body? What is it that is on their body in relation to their environment? And also, they develop cross movements, that is movements of the bigger parts of the body. The fine controls, that is your fingers to write with, small movements. Hand-to-eye coordination. In school, we write and we also move our eyes together with our hand. So such coordination is very, very important for our children. Balance, kinesthetic sense. So they should be able to move in a way that they are balanced, they don't fall easily, and so on. Then motor development in part depends in part on child's growth. Okay, so the more the child grows, the more their physical development also becomes. Well, how do we look at physical development? We look at the weight. How much does the child weigh? The height, how tall or short the child is. Body proportions. Do you have a well-developed arm, for example, in relation to the body? And also physical health. There are 2 things, however, that can jeopardize physical development of a child. One is poor nutrition, and the other one is frequent illnesses. When a child is frequently ill or they are not well fed, then their physical development is going to be interrupted. Then we look at cognitive development domain. This is now your intellect. Okay, how does the child develop intellectually? They should be able to process the thoughts and hold adequate attention when they are in class. They should be able to think about what you teach. They should be able to be attentive, to listen. They should be able to remember the events and understand the environment. They should plan, predict, regulate, and evaluate any given task or situation. So this is now the work of the mind. Then we have language. Usually because of some theories or our exposure to the way children acquire language, we tend to leave this to just natural development. All right, but it's very important that we don't take it for granted, because some children need help when it comes to language development, and also the other aspects that need to grow, that they need to be aware of. We need to assist them. So language development and effective communication capabilities are highly dependent on other developmental domains. So if your physical development is not up to date, then your language also suffers. If you're not socially aware of your environment, you cannot communicate with the others. So it depends on other domains. If you can't think properly, your cognitive is below par, then obviously you cannot form ideas that in turn should be translated into language. Effective verbal ability is dependent on phonology, semantics, pragmatics, morphology, and syntax. All these form part of a language. So we need to look at all these areas or levels of language in order for us to gauge the language development of a child. Then social development domain. Here we talk about emotional development, children's ability to express emotions. Do they form attachments with the other children? Can they play with others? What about if others put them under pressure? Are they able to handle that? Or do they cry often when they are put under pressure? Then feelings of others and control their feeling. Do they understand why others feel in certain ways? And can they control their own feelings? For example, anger. Maybe when they have another child having something, would they just go and grab? Or should they be able to understand that, no, it doesn't belong to me. If I have to want it, maybe I should ask. Okay? Or if the child says no, then I should respect that. Social interaction demands that children are able to cooperate, follow direction, have moral reasoning, demonstrate self-control. So self-control in terms of this is where I want to go, okay? It is wrong to do this. So all these, the issues of morals, they should be able to demonstrate those. Do they exercise self-restraint? For example, if they want something that the other child has, do they just take it, steal it, or what do they do? Do they ask? If they are not given, do they respect that? Children's inherent temperament plays a major role in their ability to interact socially and handle emotional reactions. Sometimes we talk about temperament. Temperament is when we talk of people that are short-tempered, people that cannot control their emotions as much as well as others. So this part is also very much it's part of the nature of being of a person. So the social development depends very much on whether a child is short-tempered, whether they are patient enough, and all that, and these are part of their nature. Language development. When we talk about language development, there are factors that influence language development of children. These are social factors, cognitive processes, linguistic factors, conceptual and perceptual factors. When we talk about domains and factors influencing language development, usually students confuse these. So it is a good idea that you understand there are 4 domains, but there are also 4 factors that influence language development. Now, social factors. What do we mean when we say social factors in relation to language development? Social environment, that is your peers, the school environment, the home where the child grows up, what kind of language input is there, or what is it that assists them to develop language? Okay, first of all, interaction is very important. That is with parents, with those adults that are in touch with the child. It's very crucial that they interact with the child in terms of language. The child must not just sit there and not being spoken to. So the verbal environment influences language learning. That is how much the child is spoken to, how much a child hears people talk. Maintain conversation when your child is around. So they shouldn't just hear, they shouldn't just be told things, but they should be encouraged to also respond to what is being said to them. When the social environment of the home is centered on watching television, language and verbal expressions decrease. Nowadays, we look at television as if it was a child minder or the one that should teach children things. But the human factor is very, very important. It's very important that there is really actual talking to children other than just leaving them to the television. Otherwise, their verbal expression will decrease. Then we have cognitive processes. How does the child's mind function in relation to language? This affects the way her own language develops, but it also again boils down to exposure. How much exposure to language does the child have in order for them to start thinking about it? So it has been, research says that children who are exposed to an unusually high proportion of examples of language form learn at a faster rate than those who are not. So language form at home is very important in order to trigger that cognitive process about language. Linguistic factors. Linguistic ability directly influences language development. That is now how much does the child have a command of the language. This will involve things like your semantics, the vocabulary that the child has, vocabulary, exposure to so many items at home. In formulating an own vocabulary, a child will associate a new word with a current object he does not have a label or word to associate with it. So in most cases, when they do not know an object, they will always think that the new word that they are learning might describe that object because they are both new. It's also common that verb endings such as ing infer a meaning to your toddler. That would be maybe processes such as swimming and so on. But a very common one in our own environment is when children go to kindergarten. They have not mastered the past tense forms of words yet. And then you will hear that every way they need to form a past tense structure, they use the word did in front of it. I did go. I did swim. So that is another way that the children express their linguistic naivety, that they haven't been exposed to, to more advanced structures, so they find a way to solve that. Conceptual and perceptual. Here, what we need to understand that the concept of language is also related to word knowledge. How much does the child know? How many words do they know to be able to express themselves? A child's auditory perceptual skills at 6 to 12 months is a predictor of their vocabulary size and syntactic complexity at 23 months. So the perception of sounds at a very early age determines the vocabulary size also when about 2 years later, yes. All right, so those are the factors that influence language development. Now, perspectives of language learning. These are also very, very important. Based on, constructivist perspective of language learning is one. And this constructivist, it's like to construct. Constructivist is from the word to construct, that learners are able to construct their own knowledge. All right? That's what we must understand. We are just facilitators in this view, but learners should be able to construct their own language. They are responsible for their own learning. Here we talk about learner-centered, kind of approach. So what do we believe in this perspective? One belief is that knowledge is not a thing that can be simply given by the teacher at the front of the room to students in their desks. They are not empty vessels that when they come there we give them the knowledge, but we expose them to experiences and they create their own knowledge. Knowledge is constructed by learners through an active mental process of development. If they have to learn, they need to be involved mentally. They need to be active in our, conducive classrooms. Learners are builders and creators of meaning and knowledge. They do it themselves. Constructivism draws on the development work of constructivism by reference to 4 principles. There are 4 principles. One is that learning depends on what we already know. So when they arrive there, we don't assume they don't know anything. We just build on what they already know. New ideas occur as we adapt and change our old ideas. So let them work with these old ideas to accommodate new ideas. Learning involves inventing ideas rather than mechanically accumulating facts. It's not rote learning where you just accumulate facts, but you must be inventive. Meaningful learning occurs through rethinking old ideas and coming to new conclusions about new ideas which conflict with our old ideas. Learner-centered active instruction. The teacher provides students with experiences that allow them to hypothesize, predict, manipulate objects, pose questions, research, investigate, imagine, and invent. So all we do is just create that intriguing environment for them to learn in. We expose them to what they can think about, what they can predict, what they can manipulate, what they can research about, find out on their own, provided we aid them, we give them an enabled environment. The teacher's role is to facilitate this process. Learning occurs by an active construction of meaning rather than by passive recipients. They assimilate new experiences within existing knowledge and they accommodate new knowledge. So this is what constructivism is about. It is the way the learner-centered model of teaching and learning comes from. Behaviourist perspective of language learning. Here we're talking about the fact that when learners learn, or when children are born, they are born into a world of humans. And when they are born in this world of humans, they imitate role models. So the adults in their life act as role models of language. So they imitate those. But what is very important is that when these children imitate their parents, their older siblings, they are always greeted with reward. Reward does not necessarily mean given a feeder of milk or a sweet or anything, but that appreciation, that expression of happiness on the parent's face, the clapping of hands, the wow, all that kind of, surprise, happiness that comes with their achievement or their utterance of a sound becomes a motivating factor for them. And that urges them to practice more and more because they know that you're going to clap hands for them, praise them, they will be encouraged to do more. Human role models provide rewards and stimuli. Reward would be what you give them or what you say to them after they've said a word. Stimuli is that you also give input. By listening to you, they hear, and when they hear, they also imitate you. Children praised and given affection for attempting a language pattern. So this is the kind of reward that they get. So praise and affection is reward. However, this perspective of language learning is criticized for many things. People looked at this and they say, but is it enough to just imitate and be rewarded and then practice on? Is that all what language learning is all about? All right, because we have seen in situations where parents are inattentive, some parents are absent, they are not there with their children to offer this reward. But have we seen a situation where children stopped speaking, learning to speak because their parents are not attentive, their parents are not giving them reward? And also, sometimes we find novel forms of language in children that are not, said by their parents or the role models in their life. And also, children acquire language uniformly. So you go to children in Windhoek, they may be acquiring language acquisition in them, may be the same as those in Oshakati, even if they are hearing different role models speaking. Then interactionist perspective of language development. This theory or this perspective believes that language acquisition is both biological and social. So you cannot take the other away, all right? Influenced by desire to communicate, the children have a desire to communicate, but they are also born with a powerful brain. And they've got a brain, but they also have desire to communicate. As the brain matures slowly and predisposes them to acquire new understanding because they are also in a social environment. Then the nativist perspective of language learning. This one is a perspective by Noam Chomsky. He says that humans are biological programmed to gain knowledge. So it's in our nature. It's in our nature to gain knowledge. But also, he says there is an innate, what he calls an LAD, something that is within us that enables us to acquire language. He thinks of it as a device, just like a chip that you put in a computer or something that reads memory and so on. So that's what he equates what exists within us as human beings to acquire language. It's as if it's just a device. It contains knowledge of grammatical rules common to all languages. So we are able to understand grammatical rules of all the languages that we are exposed to. As children, as they grow, they should also be able to understand the rules of any language. He talks about transformational grammar. He talks about deep structure and surface structure. Then young learners, as they come to our classes, they have different difficulties. You have a table in your study guides. The information is presented in a table form. Some children have difficulty in concentrating. So as teachers, we need to find remedies for this. If children cannot concentrate, there are two ways that we can try and achieve concentration. One is the variety of activities in one lesson. So they do different activities in one lesson. There are those that really get bored quite easily. So if you change to another activity, they will be able to also concentrate for that short period of time. So you need to just make sure that you vary and you don't make them too long. Combine active activities such as singing. So integrate those activities that are active activities. Some of the learning must be done in singing, some of them in nursery rhymes and so on. Then there are those that are very active, curious, unself-conscious and willing. All right? So these that want to do something all the time. You have drama, you have singing and games, you have attractive visual aids such as pictures, self-discovery activities like puzzles and games. Build something, those building blocks. Let them do it themselves because they really want to do something. They're very active. Then there are those that learn quickly but forget quickly also. What do? You constantly revise the content. Make sure that the new structure that they learn is integrated in lessons and informal talks. Okay? Display new words in the classroom. All those words that they learn, display them so that they can constantly remind themselves. Provide and consent with the immediate world. There are those that think about the immediate world, about themselves. So here you provide familiar teaching material, the things that they know about, that is from their own world. Let them talk about themselves, friends, and home. Okay? Can you tell us about your family, your dad? Let them practice language by those things that they are close to them. Then you have those that need constant praise. At times we don't read our learners in class. There are those that get discouraged because we don't just notice them. And they need to be noticed. That is how they are. You can't change them. So read their characteristics and respond accordingly. All right? Give them the activities that they can do. Some children cannot handle getting a 0. They give up already. So make sure that you allow them to do something that they know. Let them know you are pleased with their efforts. Okay? Give them praise when doing something and correct them gently. Do not scream at them, tell them they are stupid because they cannot do that. It should be very smooth the way you correct them. Okay? Then we have English sounds by using a sound chart. How do we teach English sounds? Okay? First of all, our learners need to know the English alphabet from A to Z. All right? So we can't introduce A to Z in one lesson. So let's practice a few of them. Okay? A few sounds each week. 26 letters that we have, but 40 sounds in English. So we cannot bombard them with all these sounds. We need to introduce them, steadily, gradually. Knowledge of sounds enables them to read, write, and speak properly. We cannot underestimate the importance of sounds, because that's what they translate into reading, write, and speaking. Prepare flashcards for each letter. Hold it up and say the letter. Revise the letters until they can say the entire alphabet. Then start teaching the sound for each letter. First of all, alphabet, then the sounds. For each sound, hold up the flashcard and say the sound. Tell the pupils to repeat the sound several times. Write the letter of the sound and repeat the sound. Stand with your back to the children and form the letter of the sound in the air. Ask children to make the same shape while saying the sound. Ask them to write the letter in the sand. You go out in the sand because they can erase and try as many times that they want. Let them write several rows of the sound in their books. Go around and help them to do this well. Find pictures of objects that begin with the new sound. So if it's A for then apple can be part of that. And every child, I think, knows an apple, and they will be able to associate that sound with the letter. Then teaching language skills in an integrated way. There are 4 skills that we need to teach in the English language: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In most cases, language use is the fifth one. One must also learn the structure of a language and how to use them. When you teach a language, you really teach the skills of the grammar separately. So these skills are kind of interwoven into the listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills, the grammar. Any language lesson is a lesson of mixed skills. You can't say today we're just going to do listening, because while you do that, there are a lot of other, even if you do a listening exercise, they are still going to write, okay? And they're going to in the end, give you the answers, speak, all right? So mixed skills should integrate the various language skills. Every lesson should integrate various language skills, because in everyday life we use these skills. Okay, for example, when you are talking on the telephone, your cell phone, you speak, you listen. Some people would even take notes. Let me just write down. You are giving me ingredients for cooking this, so I can take down notes. So in our languages, we make sure that we structure our lessons in such a way that in one lesson, our children can listen, speak, read, and write. Okay. Learning English is learning a second language and learning a mother tongue are done in different ways. First of all, we need to understand that the age at which we learn a first language or mother tongue and the age at which we learn a second language, which is in most cases English for us in schools, is different. Our teachers are different. How long the time that we're given to learn is also different. I think from the day a child is born, they are already given an opportunity to start learning language, because they interact with the mothers and those immediate family members. Generally, you learn a second language a lot later than you learn the first language. This can give you certain advantages. First of all, you already have experience as a language learner, and that you are cognitively more matured, so your mind is more matured. You also have meta-linguistic knowledge. This means that you know what a word is and what it means to make a noun plural. You also have a great knowledge of people in the world. You also, can make good guesses at the meaning of the unfamiliar language you encounter, given the context and so on. You can have all these clues to find out. On the other end, the fact that you are older may mean that you are more inhibited, you are more restricted, you are more sensitive to what people hear you say. You are less spontaneous. You are not as enthusiastic as you were when you were a baby. You wouldn't mind if people thought you were silly or anything, or if you said something silly. But now, as a grown-up person, you are afraid of all those things. When it comes to using new language, you would be afraid that you would make mistakes and people would think you're silly. The most important teachers of your first language are, of course, your parents and immediate family. Generally, these are very patient and enthusiastic people. They want you to, they are very much interested, like we said, in the other perspective language learning, where we said that we reward the children. So you've got the patience, you've got the eagerness or the enthusiasm to reward them every time they say something. By intuition, offer just the right kind of input to promote optimal language learning. Intuition, that means that without effort, it just happens that you give the right input. This modulated language input is called motherese, because as the mother, does her act of mothering, the language is also transferred to a child. Communication also happens naturally. A feature of which is the fact that mistakes of fact are corrected, whereas mistakes of grammar generally are not. In our mother tongue, we learn the grammar later. Otherwise, people are interested in us just communicating. This all contrasts strongly with the teaching that many learners of second language receive in the language classroom. Otherwise, in the language classroom, the moment you make a mistake, the teacher will say, no, verb, subject, agreement. You do this subject, object, verb, subject, verb, SVO, subject, verb, object. That is the structure of your sentence. So in other words, when we learn our mother tongue, we are not controlled by grammar. We were not corrected on mistakes of grammar, whereas later when we learn the second language, we are corrected. Then phonetics and phonology. In phonetics, we look at production and perception of speech sounds as physical entities. Here it's just speech sounds in general, okay? Whereas phonology, sound patterns, sound system of a particular language. When they are packaged, when phonetics is packaged to say that this is how a particular language sounds, then it becomes phonology, okay? Vowels, consonants are very important. When we pronounce consonants, vowels, we don't close any part of our vocal, canal cord. Our vocal parts. We let the air flow out. Okay. We let the air flow out, and then speech sound made by partially completely blocking the flow of air through the mouth. That is now the consonants. Teaching pronunciation, first of all, we can teach that through minimal pace. We look at one sound, two words that vary in only one sound. So we take two words that vary in only one sound, and they've got another that is the same. For example, pet, cat. So we are looking at the et in that. So when we pronounce all these, except for the P and C, we are able to find the same sound. This way of teaching pronunciation helps with pronunciation by focusing on one sound. It also expands the children's vocabulary. Then isolation. Here we isolate particular sound. The people say it with you repeatedly. You focus on small nuances, for example, the correct spelling, ingraining the sound patterns in their minds. This is very helpful for struggling learners. Tongue twisters. These are phrases or words designed to be difficult to say correctly. So it's about shaping your mouth, position your mouth correctly. They are fun also. So this is one way of learning pronunciation. Then bingo, teaching vocabulary. First of all, you need to get a piece of paper. You draw a rectangle on the chalkboard and divide it into 6 squares. Ask children to copy it down. Ask them to draw pictures of the words they have just learned. So if one of the words that they've learned is apple, they need to draw an apple. Hold up the word flashcard, one at a time. Then you ask the pupils to tick the picture when the matching word is held. The winner is the first people to tick all the pictures. Types of mistakes. We find grammatical mistakes, vocabulary mistakes, pronunciation mistakes, and written mistakes. All these are mistakes that as teachers we need to correct. Then telling stories. First of all, it helps children to cope with many feelings. Caring time. Children enjoy reading, so you need to read for them. They impact their future learning. If they are so inquisitive, they will always, derive that enthusiasm to learn further when they become adults. Helps to understand ourselves and make sense of the world. When children see you read, they get a positive message about reading. And children who enjoy reading are likely to become confident learners, can become a hobby. Some children will have reading as a hobby. And it builds a sense of security and self-esteem, helps with language and thinking. The chalkboard. This is very important. It's more widely used, and we know that there are a lot of other, teaching aids that we have, but the chalkboard is still relevant. There are a number of things that we can do with it. It permits contrast, can be used to enumerate items, sum up the important points of the lesson. You can also draw flowcharts to illustrate for. In most cases, we find that the chalkboard is not used to full potential, and also we need to write neatly and clearly on the chalkboard. Storytelling, story reading activities. before we read, ask if they know anything about the story, show an object, show a picture of an important character, introduce important words. These are activities that prepare the children for story reading. When they are done reading, these are also activities that you can do. For example, they talk about similar experiences, draw and color pictures of a scene or character. They retell story in their own words, viewpoint, and then they fill in blanks of the summary. Or they can write letters to each other, pretend to be the characters, dramatize the story, or they can, perform a dialogue. They can perform a dialogue. Then the grammar aspects, the types of verbs, action verbs, helping verbs, regular verbs, irregular takes other forms instead of ending with ed when changed into the simple past tense. Then helping verbs used to qualify the tense of ing forms. Action verbs state the action. Being verbs, these express a state of being, for example, is, are, were, and am. Tenses can be classified in terms of their function and form. Simple present tense, the root of the verb. Simple past tense form of the verb. Simple future tense, will, shall, plus the root of the verb. Future continuous uses will, shall, plus the verb to be, plus the root and the ing form. The perfect present perfect uses have, has or have, plus the past participle. So this is actually the end of our presentation. As I said earlier, you need to look, especially with the grammar part, look at these aspects in your study guide and understand them properly, because we don't fix questions of grammar. They change all the time. So look at all aspects that are covered. Thank you very much, and best of luck.